If you've ever battled with procrastination, you know it can feel like a deep personal failing, like there's something fundamentally wrong with you. But what if it's not about laziness? What if it's not a lack of discipline at all? Today, we're going to dive into a totally different way of looking at procrastination, and it might just change everything.
I mean, does this sound familiar? You spend your days feeling like you're constantly behind. Deadlines are always looming, and there's this sense of panic just building. That whole cycle of putting things off, only to get crushed by stress later, it is exhausting, but believe me, you are definitely not alone.
It's so easy to start feeling like the world is split into two groups of people. You've got the ones who can handle the stress and just succeed, no problem. And then there's everyone else who feel like they're just constantly failing, struggling their whole lives. It's a really harsh way to see things, but so many of us secretly put ourselves in that second group.
To even try and compete, it can feel like you have to push yourself so much harder, be better, do more, and it's just absolutely crushing. Procrastination in this light isn't laziness at all. It actually becomes a coping mechanism, right? It's a way to delay that agony, that pressure to be perfect, and to just avoid that feeling of judgment for one more minute.
And this right here brings us to a huge insight. Procrastination is not the actual problem, it's a symptom. It's a warning sign, kind of like the canary in the coal mine, that's hinting at something much deeper going on inside your brain.
So here's the crucial part to get. This is not a conscious choice. It's not a moral failing on your part. It is an automatic survival response. Your brain is putting a system in place that it genuinely thinks is protecting you. And we really need to start taking that warning seriously.
Okay, so let's look at how this actually plays out in the brain. Think of your brain as having two main parts. You've got the right side, that's your primal, survival-focused brain. Its only job is to keep you safe, to make sure you don't die. Then you have the left side, which is all logical and rational. It handles all the fancy, higher-level thinking and complex decisions. So what happens when we get stressed by that looming deadline? Well, your right brain senses an emergency and completely takes over. It basically tells the logical left brain to take a hike, because hey, you don't need calculus when a saber-toothed tiger is chasing you, right? So when you're procrastinating and then panicking, you are literally operating with only half a brain.
How wild is that? So why on earth does our brain see a simple work project as a life or death threat? Well, it often comes down to this really sneaky root cause that connects our daily stressors to things that happened a long time ago. Now, when we hear the word trauma, we usually think of big T trauma, the major, life-threatening events that should never happen to anyone. It's what most of us understand trauma to be. But then there's also little t trauma. These are situations that aren't life-threatening but are still super distressing and can leave a really lasting impact. Things like being bullied as a kid, or even the death of a beloved pet.
And that brings us to this newer concept called tiny t trauma. These are small, often totally overlooked, unmet needs from childhood that cause our brains to form these really sticky, negative beliefs about ourselves. Maybe you were only praised when you got a perfect score. Or maybe you watched your parents just work themselves into the ground. Your little brain files that away as a rule for survival. I must be perfect, or I must work until I collapse.
Okay, let me give you a real-world example. Take Francesca. She was a total free spirit as a kid, and she hated being told what to do. So as an adult, having to be at work on time every single day, it felt just like being bossed around all over again. Her tiny t trauma, that old conflict, caused her to subconsciously resist by procrastinating every single morning. Or think about Amani. In school, she always felt like she wasn't as smart as the other kids. So she'd put off her homework. That way, if she got a bad grade, she could blame it on not having enough time instead of risking failure by actually trying her best. Years later, that same tiny t belief stopped her from starting her dream kitchen remodel because the fear of not doing it perfectly was just too much to handle.
So now we kind of get the why behind procrastination. But the big question is, how do we actually fix it? Because it's not about trying harder or getting a new productivity app. We need to understand the difference between just putting a Band-Aid on it and actually fixing the problem for good.
Think about it this way. If you were running a race and you kept tripping over your untied shoelaces, would you just decide to carry a bunch of Band-Aids for your scraped knees? Of course not. That's ridiculous.
You'd stop and you'd tie your laces before the race even starts.
Procrastination is the Band-Aid. It feels safe in the moment, you know? It's like a safe little harbor protecting you from a storm of fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, maybe even fear of success. But that harbor doesn't help you win the race. The real solution, tying your shoelaces, is to address that root fear directly by calming your nervous system.
So how do you do that? How do you actually calm your nervous system when that panic starts to bubble up? Let's get into a really practical, actionable tool you can use immediately, like right now.
The whole point here is to send a direct message of safety to your survival brain. When you do this, you can actually bypass that automatic procrastination response and get your logical left brain back online.
All right, let's walk through this simple 3-step exercise. You can even do this with me if you want. First step, rub your hands together, get them nice and warm, then place them on your cheeks and your neck, and just take a nice deep breath. Okay, step 2. Rub them again, cross your arms, and gently squeeze your shoulders as you breathe. And step 3. One more time, rub your hands, cross your arms, and squeeze just above your elbows. Take one last deep breath. This simple physical act helps stimulate something called the vagus nerve, which is like a superhighway for sending calming signals straight to your brain.
And doing this consistently doesn't just help you manage stress in the moment. It actually starts to rewire those old beliefs and unlocks what's truly possible for you when you finally break that procrastination cycle.
So what happened to Francesca and Amani? Well, once they understood and started working through their tiny T trauma, the changes were huge. Francesca isn't late for work anymore. In fact, she even got a promotion. And Amani? She finally got her dream kitchen, and she quit that stressful job for one that she truly loves. And this leads to one final powerful question for you to think about. What would your life be like if you could use all of that amazing energy to rise above actual challenges instead of draining it by constantly creating your own emergencies through that procrastination stress cycle?
It's really about accessing more self-love, performing at your best, and finally showing up as your full, authentic self. The potential on the other side of this is immense. The only thing left to do is to go out there and unleash it.